Good afternoon. It is TalkTV 03444991000. 3:05. Lots to wade through in this hour, including this.
Some of you have got good reasons to oppose ULEZ, but you're in coalition with COVID deniers, you're in coalition with the far right, and you're in coalition with vaccine deniers as well.
Good Lord. So let's get into this. The Sadiq Khan stuff. It's interesting because I'm always aware whenever we discuss anything about Sadiq Khan, we're talking about, and it's the same if we discuss Andy Burnham, you know, you're generally talking about Manchester. In this case, you're talking about London. But there is a slight difference here because often what happens with a policy down in London, you know, London sneezes in this respect and the rest of the country catches a cold when it comes to congestion charges and cameras and how to curtail traffic and all manner of other zones, anything to impede the man or woman on four wheels. Invariably starts down in the capital. So they've got this ULEZ zone. This is a way of saying if your car is full of gunky old tut that we don't like, then, you know, you've got to pay. We're not bothered. You can come in as long as you pay for it, which in itself is kind of curious. Anyway, so they put these new cameras in as part of the expansion in South London. They've been vandalised because there's a backlash around this expansion. Images have emerged which show 4 cameras in Greenwich which appear to have had their wires cut. It's very naughty. Nobody would encourage that, of course. The cameras, TfL, Transport for London's automatic number plate recognition cameras, which operate 24 hours a day and police the ULEZ zone. They do this automatically. The images of tampered with cameras come as the level of opposition grows against the expansion of ULEZ, with politicians and campaign groups calling on the mayor to reverse his decision. Well, you heard what he said in that clip. That was the town hall meeting in Ealing that, as I mentioned last week, I happened to be walking past that meeting as it was happening and met a load of the protesters who were not cranks and conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxers. They were just people who thought the mayor was frankly bonkers on this one. Let's speak with Geoff Thompson, motoring commentator and presenter of Geoff Buys Cars, the YouTube channel. Geoff, afternoon to you.
Hello, how you doing?
Good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us. So, I mean, just put some meat on the bones of this one. I mean, I've sort of set it out roughly there, but it's fair to say, I mean, this is a very impenetrable mayor. He's a mayor that almost doesn't make any secret of the fact that you can say, you can have your opposition, but I'm not going to listen to you anyway.
Pretty much. I mean, the consultation has, by and large, been ignored. The opposition to the ULEZ expansion has been huge and very vocal from the start. And so far, we've had no sounding from Mr. Khan at all that he might bend, basically.
Yeah, and as you heard in that clip, which annoyed a lot of people, you know, you can disagree with me if you want, but you stand next to COVID deniers and conspiracy theorists.
I think what he's saying now is outright offensive. I mean, I've had on my channel a letter from someone that has been deeply impacted by the idea of the ULEZ expanding, and what it seems to do is paint a picture of Mr. Khan as someone that absolutely does not live in the real world or understand the needs of real people.
Yeah, but does drive around in a 5-litre Range Rover. But let's let that put that to one side for a second. Just talk
there is that.
Just talk us through, Geoff. I appreciate it's a police Range Rover, but nonetheless, talk us through.
It's still a V8.
Absolutely right. What are the main oppositions to this? Because of course, the difficulty that everybody who raises their head against anything like this, the difficulty you have is that Sadiq Khan then says you're kind of like a flat earther. I think he used that phrase to a fellow radio presenter on another channel quite recently. Again, it's throw the insults out there. He's perfectly relaxed about all of this because he believes that he's not only legally right and sound, but he's morally sound, because this is about green stuff. It's about the environment, and he can go to those big European and global meetings of mayors. I'm sure they have these powwows every now and again, and he'll be a bit of a hero, and he's comfortable in that skin. So he's not particularly bothered if people have a moan up. What are the main reasons, though, the really good reasons for people to be concerned about this?
Well, this is the thing, and this is what switched me onto this ULEZ expansion in the first place. I don't live in London. I'm not actually directly affected by it. But what we're seeing, when I first saw the statistics and he said he was going to do a scrappage scheme where you can trade in your old car, and I very quickly ran the numbers and realised the number of vehicles he was proposing to take off the road for the scrappage scheme in terms of the CO2 they produce would be completely dwarfed by the numbers that would be produced, the CO2 that would be produced in the production of these new vehicles that would replace them. So it didn't take me very long to realise that this seemed to me to be a bit of a scam. At the very best, it was a case of moving CO2 out of London and producing more somewhere else. And I just thought that was absolutely crazy. This was just before Christmas that I'd just gone to that. But as we've gone further down the line, as the opposition has got more and more vocal, not only is the opposition to the ULEZ expansion absolutely huge, but the case for the ULEZ expansion and the science behind the case for the ULEZ expansion doesn't really seem to stand up to scrutiny. So it's a policy that directly impacts mostly the poorest of society, which is based on rather questionable science, and the numbers just don't add up in any which way. And as you said, he's bulldozing it through regardless. There's so many councils that are now standing up. There's so many people that are standing up. The numbers don't stack up, and he's doing it anyway.
But what he's also doing is, and I'm sure this wasn't lost on you, Geoff, but this one gets me every time he wheels out that, thousands of people are dying every year because of, someone's wonky Vauxhall Corsa. And this is demonstrably not true. I mean, this is such a skewed stat that it's hardly worth the analysis, but it's simply an untruth to suggest that we have thousands of people dying because of the air in the capital.
Absolutely, and the science and the data behind that is very difficult to actually work out. But essentially, he seems to be making up the numbers as he goes along. And even if you drum it down and you say, OK, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe his numbers are correct, you then can't even put down how many of those are directly as a result of the car itself.
Yeah.
So he's using flawed figures to target the car when his figures are wrong, when the car isn't the culprit anyway. We're not looking at industry. We're not looking at the businesses that are within that area.
Yeah.
Essentially, it makes no sense. It's a cash grab and it's a power grab.
When I look around the capital, as I look out of my studio window here, Geoff, I can see almost a panoramic of the Tower of London, and then all the new buildings that are built, including the one I'm in now. Most of them in the last 20 years, certainly in the last 10, have been built with the environment in mind. They're carbon neutral. They're insulated in a very different way. Cars are very different now. Roads are very different. All sorts of other aspects of the environment. There's no way that we can be doing worse things today than were happening 20 years ago. This place is unrecognisable from a couple of decades back.
You're pretty much right. I mean, the modern cars, and he keeps changing the standards on what cars are allowed in where. Yeah. We have come a very long way from the days of the old red double-decker buses chugging around, chucking out diesel smoke. I'm happy to admit that, clean air is very important. But there's a big difference between making the air clean and just, grabbing cash out of people's wallets and stopping them from using their cars. There's better ways to do it, and that is essentially the bottom line of all of my YouTube videos about the ULEZ. I don't agree with this constant attack on the private car, these constant attacks on the motorist. And I think if we're genuine about saving the environment, and we're genuine about cleaning up the air, there's much better ways of doing it than stopping Auntie Ethel from driving across one road to go to the hospital to visit her sister,
Absolutely right. And the very serious point on all of this is that you mentioned, the poorest people will be affected, and the average working man or woman could find themselves shelling out an enormous amount of money here just to adhere to something, even though they're driving something that previously they thought did actually tick all the correct boxes, but they're now being told it doesn't. This could have a massive effect on working people.
Huge effect, exactly. And we saw a gentleman stand up and address Mr. Khan, I think it was last week, and he says, I'm 60, I bought a car a couple of years ago based on the recommendations that were out at the time, and what do you want me to do now, replace my car or heat my house? And it seems the further we go along the line, there's a real disconnect between Khan and his policies and people that actually live in the real world. It's not a fair policy to put out because it will impact the poorest. Obviously, the rich will just pay it and write it down as tax deductible, and that'll be that. But that's not the case for your nurse who works at the hospital, or anyone visiting parents or whatever it may be. There's a real disdain for the real human being within the policy itself.
Indeed. Geoff, listen, very thorough stuff. Thank you for coming on with us. We will speak again. Geoff Thompson, motoring commentator. And check out Geoff's YouTube channel as well. It's called Geoff Buys Cars. And there are an awful lot of videos on there with Geoff articulating brilliantly all manner of aspects around vehicles, cars, this kind of thing as well. Some great monologues and some detail there too, and comment along the way as well. That's Geoff Thompson with us here on Talk TV. 0344 499 1000. Back to you in a few moments' time. It's 17 minutes after 3.